Donald Trump's inauguration as President of the United States was a global spectacle, watched with keen interest by allies and adversaries alike. However, the new administration wasted no time in stirring controversy, with some of its day-one decisions, such as withdrawing from the World Health Organization (WHO) and the Paris Climate Agreement, sparking immediate debate. The burning question remains: what does Trump truly intend for America? Will his presidency mark the rise of a more formidable global power, or usher in a period of unprecedented decline? America's European allies are grappling with the implications of Trump's return to the White House. Concerns about security, economic stability, and the future of NATO are dominating discussions across the continent. On Thursday, 50 European leaders convened in Budapest at the European Political Community Summit, a platform established in 2022 in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. French President Emmanuel Macron captured the sentiment of many when he urged Europe to prioritize its interests in this uncertain geopolitical landscape. We have two dominant blocs, the United States and China, each pursuing their own interests, Macron declared. Our focus shouldn't be on questioning Trump's legitimacy. He was elected by the American people. Instead, we must ask ourselves, are we prepared to defend European interests? That must be our priority. This sentiment reflects a growing realization in Europe that reliance on the US as a steadfast ally may no longer be viable. The Trump administration's unpredictability has prompted calls for a stronger, more independent Europe, capable of navigating global challenges without undue dependence on Washington. The NATO question: can Europe step up? NATO has long been the cornerstone of European security, but Trump's previous threats to withdraw from the alliance loom large. Ed Arnold, a senior research fellow for European security at Britain's Royal United Services Institute, highlighted the immediate challenge: maintaining support for Ukraine amid a potential US pullback. The mechanisms, whether through NATO, the EU, or bilateral agreements, are less important than the financial and logistical burden on individual nations, Arnold explained. If Europe is to fill the gap left by the US, it will require a significant ramp-up in effort and resources. Analysts like Ian Bond of the Centre for European Reform agree that Europe has the capacity to shoulder more responsibility, but caution that it will demand political will and unity. There's a risk that some countries, particularly in Western Europe, might advocate for compromises that are unacceptable to nations like Poland or the Baltic states, which see Russia as an existential threat, Bond warned. Trump and the Russia-Ukraine conflict: peace or power play? Throughout his campaign, Trump repeatedly claimed he could end the Russia-Ukraine war on day one, though he has offered little detail on how he intends to achieve this. His past remarks about having a good relationship with Russian President Vladimir Putin have raised alarms in Kyiv and across Europe. Many fear that a Trump-brokered peace deal could force Ukraine into unfavourable concessions, undermining its sovereignty and emboldening Moscow. There's a genuine concern that the US might negotiate directly with Russia, sidelining both NATO and the EU, Arnold observed. This prospect has heightened anxiety among European leaders who fear being left out of critical decisions affecting the continent's security. The future of NATO: allies or adversaries? Trump's disdain for NATO is well documented. During his first term, he reportedly considered withdrawing the US from the alliance altogether, a move that would have sent shockwaves through global security structures. Jonathan Monten, a US foreign policy analyst at University College London, believes Trump's unpredictability is both a strength and a liability. Trump thrives on keeping allies and adversaries guessing. He sees this as a source of leverage, Monten explained. The big question is whether Trump would act on his threats to weaken NATO. or if his rhetoric is merely a negotiating tactic to extract greater financial contributions from member states. Mark Rutte, NATO's new Secretary General, struck an optimistic tone, crediting Trump with pressuring allies to increase defense spending during his previous tenure. Trump was instrumental in pushing NATO members to meet their 2% GDP defense spending targets, Rutte noted. However, this achievement does little to ease fears about Trump's long-term commitment to the alliance. Economic turbulence. Europe braces for impact. Beyond security concerns, Trump's return to power could have significant economic repercussions for Europe. His promise to impose steep tariffs on imports from China and potentially the European Union threatens to disrupt global trade and strain transatlantic relations. Garrett Martin, co-director of the Transatlantic Policy Center at American University, warned of the potential fallout. Tariffs on EU imports would create economic turbulence, forcing Europe to rethink its trade policies and prioritize unity, Martin said. He also noted that Trump's divisive approach could exploit existing fractures within the EU, weakening its collective bargaining power. Trump's presidency poses a critical test for Europe's cohesion. French President Macron and other leaders have emphasized the importance of solidarity in the face of external pressures. However, maintaining unity will be challenging, particularly as nations grapple with differing priorities and domestic political dynamics. The EU must resist attempts to divide and rule, Martin cautioned. A fragmented Europe would struggle to navigate the challenges posed by a more unilateral and transactional US foreign policy. What exactly is Trump doing? Trump signed an executive order to withdraw from the Paris Accord, accompanied by a letter to the United Nations explaining the decision. In a fiery speech at Washington, D.C.'s Capital One Arena, he called the agreement a rip-off and doubled down on his vision for an energy-dominant America. His inaugural address echoed the same sentiment.
Drill, baby, drill.
He promised an era of aggressive oil and gas exploration, lower energy prices, and a complete refill of US strategic reserves. The administration has also pledged to end Biden's flagship climate legislation, the Inflation Reduction Act, which funneled billions into renewable energy projects. Trump has made it clear that green energy initiatives like wind farms and electric vehicles are not on his priority list. Instead, he's committed to propping up traditional industries like oil, gas, and even the American car industry, which he claims has suffered under Biden's EV mandate. Is this the end of clean energy in America? Not necessarily. Despite Trump's ambitions, the US is already a global energy giant. Oil production has skyrocketed by 70% since 2016, and the country leads the world in liquefied natural gas (LNG) exports. However, critics argue that this focus on fossil fuels ignores the burgeoning global clean energy market, which generated $2 trillion in 2023 alone. UN climate chief Simon Steele warned that doubling down on fossil fuels could leave America in the dust as other nations capitalize on clean energy opportunities. Embracing it means massive profits, millions of jobs, and cleaner air, Steele said. Ignoring it sends that wealth to competitors, while climate disasters worsen and economic inflation rises. Trump's renewed withdrawal from the Paris Agreement could have far-reaching consequences. Developing nations, already frustrated after COP29, failed to deliver meaningful financial support, are watching closely. Countries like Argentina might even consider following the US's lead, further jeopardizing global efforts to curb emissions. However, the international community is no stranger to US flip-flopping on climate policy. After surviving Trump's first attempt to leave the Paris Pact, there's hope that this might not be America's final word. The door remains open to the Paris Agreement, Steele assured. We welcome constructive engagement from any and all countries. But before moving forward about how Donald Trump plans to annex territories, make sure to drop a like and subscribe to our channel so we can continue making content for all of you. Back to the topic now. Canada, Greenland, and the Panama Canal. Donald Trump's musings about absorbing Canada into the United States and somehow acquiring Greenland might sound like wild campaign rhetoric, but they're not as far-fetched as they seem. In fact, the idea might fit neatly into a bigger vision for America's future under his leadership. Trump, the consummate salesman of modern American politics, think Professor Harold Hill from The Music Man, but with a MAGA hat, is dead serious about these proposals. Whether he's pitching premium dreams or borderline fantastical ideas, his skill lies in selling them with unmatched flair. And now, he's setting his sights on convincing the public that Canada and Greenland belong under the stars and stripes. Why Canada and Greenland? Speculation suggests Trump might have a futurologist whispering in his ear, someone brainstorming extreme solutions to looming global challenges, even if he avoids the term climate change to dodge the skepticism of his base. Trump seems to recognize that Canada and Greenland could play pivotal roles in maintaining US dominance in the 22nd century. Consider this: if the Arctic ice cap keeps shrinking, the elusive Northwest Passage through Canada's Arctic archipelago will become a key shipping route. This shortcut would dramatically reduce travel time between Western Europe and Asia, while providing Russia easier access to the Western Hemisphere. Controlling this route would be a game changer for global trade and military strategy, making Canada and Greenland critical assets. Trump's interest in icebreakers, a necessary tool for mapping and maintaining Arctic routes, also hints at his long-term ambitions. These ships are the backbone of Arctic exploration and dominance, and their strategic importance is only growing. A bigger picture. It doesn't stop at shipping lanes. Rising sea levels could spell trouble for the Panama Canal, a critical artery of global trade. Re-engineering the canal to handle the changes would require funds Panama can't manage alone. That's where China could step in. Unless, of course, the US reclaims control of the canal zone. Connecting Canada, Greenland, and the Panama Canal in one grand strategy could position America as the dominant power in a climate-changed world. And let's not forget agriculture. As the US loses arable land to rising temperatures, Canada and Greenland could gain fertile, grain-growing regions. Trump's focus seems to lean more towards shipping and military strategy for now, but the potential to secure new agricultural frontiers shouldn't be overlooked. Historical context: Trump's ambitions aren't without precedent. The US has eyed Canada before. During the Revolutionary War, the newly formed Continental Army tried and failed to invade. James Madison made 2 more attempts during the War of 1812. And in 1917, the US successfully purchased the Virgin Islands from Denmark. Trump's vision might be bold, but history suggests it's not entirely unthinkable, a matter of national security. Framing this vision as an issue of national economic and military security is classic Trump. He's not just talking about expanding territory. He's presenting a future where America controls critical global trade routes, projects naval power, and adapts to the challenges of a changing climate. So what do you think? Is this a visionary strategy for the US to remain a global powerhouse? Or is it just another wild Trump pitch? Either way, it's a conversation worth having, especially with the Arctic and climate-driven geopolitics becoming more critical by the day. Israel and the Middle East. The Israel-Hamas ceasefire extended into its 3rd day on Tuesday, though former President Donald Trump expressed skepticism about its longevity. In his typically blunt style, Trump doubted the truce would last, calling it their war, not ours, as he signed a flurry of executive orders shortly after his inauguration. Meanwhile, desperately needed humanitarian aid has started flowing into Gaza, a region battered by more than 15 months of relentless war. This comes as Israel and Hamas initiated the first phase of a hostage for prisoner exchange deal under the terms of the ceasefire. For many Gazans, returning to their homes means navigating through a nightmarish landscape of destruction, while rescue workers comb through rubble, hoping to recover what remains. Trump's doubts and actions. Trump, never one to shy away from taking credit, touted his role in brokering the three-phase ceasefire agreement, which was finalized with the help of Qatar and the United States. This came after months of unsuccessful negotiations during Joe Biden's presidency. One of Trump's first moves after returning to the White House was to revoke Biden-era sanctions on Israeli settlers in the West Bank, reinforcing his unwavering support for Israel. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu welcomed Trump's return, expressing optimism about continued cooperation. Netanyahu outlined plans to secure the release of hostages, dismantle Hamas's military power, and prevent Gaza from posing a future threat to Israel. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas also extended his congratulations, though the complexities of the ceasefire remain daunting. Scenes of despair and hope. The ceasefire brought moments of relief and joy, as 3 Israeli women held hostage for over 15 months were reunited with their families on Sunday. In exchange, 90 Palestinian prisoners were released, some recounting harrowing tales of their time in Israeli detention. Abdulaziz Mohammed Atawni called the experience hell, while Khalida Jarrah, a member of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, described enduring 6 months in solitary confinement. Despite these exchanges, the truce has sparked mixed emotions. Israeli families celebrated the return of loved ones, but anxiety lingers over the fate of the remaining 91 hostages, some of whom may be deceased. In Gaza, residents like Amar Barbak, who spent the first night of the truce in a tent atop the ruins of his home, expressed cautious optimism. "This is the first time I've slept without fear," Barbak said, hoping the ceasefire endures. Rebuilding amid ruins. The war has devastated Gaza, displacing most of its 2.4 million residents and leaving entire neighborhoods unrecognizable. Yet, efforts to rebuild have begun. Over 900 trucks carrying humanitarian aid entered Gaza on Monday, including 630 on the first day of the ceasefire. Qatar, instrumental in negotiating the truce, pledged to supply 12.5 million litres of fuel over the next 10 days. For some, the truce brings a glimmer of hope in a bleak landscape. Displaced Gazans like Gadir Abdul Rabbo voiced hopes for lasting peace, regardless of Trump's involvement. In Rafah, others like Ismail Mahdi vowed to rebuild, declaring, "We have endured immense hardships, but we will stay here." A fragile peace. The ceasefire marks a critical juncture, but it's fraught with uncertainty. Analysts warn that future hostage swaps could become even more painful, with some captives potentially returning in dire conditions or not at all. For now, the ceasefire offers a fragile respite from the violence, but the path to lasting peace remains uncertain. Trump's approach to governance is defined by unpredictability. This characteristic, while appealing to his base, creates uncertainty for allies and adversaries alike. His track record of abrupt policy shifts and controversial decisions has left many questioning his long-term strategic vision. Yet, despite the chaos, Trump's unconventional style has occasionally yielded results. For instance, his pressure on NATO allies to increase defense spending was a rare success. The question now is whether his second term will amplify these successes or deepen the divides within the transatlantic alliance. As Donald Trump assumes office, the world watches with bated breath. For Europe, his presidency represents both a challenge and an opportunity. The continent must confront its reliance on the US for security and economic stability, while striving to assert its own interests on the global stage. Whether Trump's policies will strengthen or undermine America's role as a global leader remains to be seen. One thing is certain: His presidency will leave an indelible mark on the international order. The stakes are high, and the decisions made in the coming years will shape the future of the transatlantic alliance and global geopolitics. What's your take on Trump's impact on Europe and the world? Will his presidency lead to a stronger America, or could it spell trouble for global stability? Let us know in the comments down below,